Hi, my name is Staci Neustadt. I'm the speech language pathologist and CEO at Making Sense of Autism. And we have Susan Golubock, our founder, and she's an autistic retired occupational therapist. And she educates me and other parents and therapists and professionals on the autistic brain and how we can best support our autistic clients and children and students. So today I want to talk about exploring the strengths of autistic individuals and how we can build on them. So first, Sue, tell us, why is this conversation so important for parents and therapists and educators and any professional that's supporting autistic individuals?
Well, if you talk about learning in the first place, why do you think they do developmental tests? To find out where they are, what they can do, and where that development kind of stops so that they can figure out what's the next step. This is standardized testing they do because most children follow a similar developmental path. Some a little faster, some a little slower. But within that normal bell curve, most of them are at this stage, at this particular age. Autistics develop differently because their brains work differently. So they follow their own developmental pattern. But you're doing the same thing. When you're looking at their strengths, you're looking at what can they already do that we can then build on, do the next step. If they can do this, well, then the next step is this. Um, and you want to build on those strengths, but oftentimes because at their chronological age, people expect that they should be able to do what a typical child would do at that age. So they start teaching them, and they're called splinter skills, i.e., skills that through enough rote repetition, a child can learn to do, but they weren't ready to learn it. They weren't looking to learn it. They don't see the relevance of what they learned. And they may end up doing it very awkwardly, and using it inappropriately, and consequently. But if you build on their strengths, and again, what you define as a strength with an autistic isn't necessarily going to look like a strength you see in a typically developing child.
So you mentioned the assessments and how we use those assessments to see what they can do. Unfortunately, a lot of times people view that as well as the deficits of what they can't do, which is unfortunate. So we're really trying to shift, look at what they can do. Now, I would say the other obstacle with the assessments is kind of what you brought up about how it is what the neurotypical brain would see as the next step. Whereas, tell us a little bit more about how we can adapt what we see in those assessments to how the autistic brain works. Should we just strictly look at, okay, they're good at this, such as picking up on patterns, or they're good at numbers, and then use that strength, or some people would call it as a motivation too, their numbers, and then use that in all of the skills in language and social? How do we build on the strength in a variety of ways?
Because if you're building on what they already know and can do, it's going to make learning something new easier and more motivating and more relevant to them, in terms of how it fits into their life. Um, Autistics want to, they can make a career based on what their particular intense interest is. Um, and who cares whether they never learn to tie their shoes? Who cares whether um, uh, they don't cook their own food? Those things that you see as, oh, everybody by this age should be able to do these things. Quit focusing on what they can't do and teaching them what they can't do. Um, uh, but there are certain things that everyone needs to learn,
Mhm.
like the social rules. So you use things like numbers because that's their strength to help them understand. Okay, percentages of socially, the majority of people talking about the bell curve kind of thing um, follow these social rules. Now there are the 5% on here and 5% this direction. These that break the rules all the time. These that are so rigid about the rules that they get themselves in trouble because they have no flexibility. But those are percentages, and they can understand the math concept of percentages. So now they understand, oh, okay, where do I want to be on this scale? Well, yeah, I'm kind of rigid about these things, but I guess I can't be too rigid. That's only 5%. I'd rather be a target maybe at a 20% or you know, or 25%. That computes with them as to it makes sense to them
Mhm.
because you're using what they understand to help them learn about social rules.
And that's really helpful to know. You know, it's hard. I don't know that many of us would figure out how to connect numbers with social rules, so that was a great example. I know we've talked in our trainings about other strengths, such as attention to detail, recognizing patterns. I know I've got a little kiddo who picks up on patterns really well, but also craves to learn that cause and effect. And so
Mm.
cause and effect has created some really fun therapy sessions where we just figure out how things happen. And it's also built on his language to even model what happened, you know, things like that.
Mhm.
And he's picked up on those kinds of phrases. So, how, let's just pick one of those in terms of attention to detail, which I feel like I have a lot of clients that also that's a huge strength. One, how does a parent or a therapist notice that that is their strength? And two, then what do they do with that?
Noticing attention to detail is usually going to show up in that the autistic info dumps. In other words, gathers all the details that they've had and they have to tell you every single detail because they don't know what to leave out because they're not able to filter what's important and what's maybe not important in this particular situation or with this particular individual in terms of how much information to give. They've just got it all to give and they see it all as relevant. So they tend to talk too much, too long about what all the details that they've collected. And oftentimes that attention to detail, they're not going to necessarily see how all that fits together and forms a big picture. Um, but that's where you can really help them. Oh, did you know? And take those details and help them see how they connect to form. It's kind of like seeing the elephant in the room, and you're only focused on the tail or the toes or the nose. Um, Help them see how they can put those details together that form a picture of, well, wow, if you put this and this and this, look at what you've got. And help them to put it together. You're helping them shift to the other side of the brain to see things from another perspective that maybe they're not looking at. When they get used to it, they're going to start wanting to put those pieces together themselves and say, well, how does this fit with that? And they're going to be curious about. But until they experience what it's like to have that information and see how to use it, how to say, well, let's just use these details, not all the details. But if we put these together, it makes an interesting pattern. If we put these together, it makes a different pattern. Um, that's using their strength.
Mhm.
And you can use patterns for social patterns. Oh, there's all kinds of patterns in life, math patterns and um, uh, geography, history. There's all kinds of patterns that you can apply. Do you see how there's a pattern to history? There's a pattern to why people do the things they do and make social rules and guidelines. And have them put it all together, and they're going to start seeing that, oh, that's what I should do with all these details I've gathered, is find a way to put them together.
So I like that. So that's kind of the two strengths together of using attention to detail and picking up on that pattern. And I love that idea of showing them how it all goes together, because I know, as you know, I work in the schools sometimes, and that is such a common goal where I see therapists or teachers want a student to be able to summarize or be able to answer questions. And it is so hard for some of our students because they just want
Mhm.
to, they have great, great word memory with stories. So they just kind of regurgitate everything that they heard, and think all the details are important. So I like kind of that reverse engineering. Now another thing that I know we've talked about in the past, that's often seen with little kids, or even level 2 or level 3 autistics that have that strength of attention to detail, is that common lining up toys or lining up cars, things like that. Tell us a little bit more about how can therapists or even parents build on that strength.
Well, a lot of the lining up is just making order out of chaos. Because when we take in so much wealth of information, we're not able to filter out. Other people can block out and pay attention to this, but we take it all in.
This is a
Then,
huge strength because they're trying to
hey,
organize the chaos. The worst
mhm,
thing anyone could do is to interrupt that organization. But
mhm.
how would a parent or therapist build on that strength of wanting to kind of organize and create patterns and recognizing that detail?
Well, number one, if you interrupt them, you're going to get negative behavior because now you created chaos when they're trying to put things in order. What they're communicating with their behavior is that I am feeling the need to for order. Okay, help them complete. And I've had to do this with my kid who was really stuck on puzzles, and she would not transition until she could finish those puzzles. Um, and so I would then help her to finish them. In other words, help her complete the order in which she was trying to achieve, and then put it back where it belongs so she knew where to find it the next time she needed it. So I went along with her need for order and organization. Then we could move on. I recognized, and then, okay, then she was okay. Um, so when it comes to learning math, history, social rules, all of the rest of that, um, let them see the patterns and help them organize that information, using those strengths of, of categorizing things, putting them in some kind of order so they can see the relevance and what to do with all this wealth of information. Then you can get them to focus their attention on maybe you've organized them into rows of blue cars, red cars, yellow cars. Oh, now pay attention to the color difference. Oh, now let's reorganize them based on the model of car they are. So I want a concept of so that they can see that you can reorder things
Mhm.
and now learn something new about them.
No, I love that.
And this is the same with social similarities and differences among people. Um, okay, I'm different in that I have brown eyes, and let's put all the dolls or that have brown eyes in a category versus blue eyes versus now let's rearrange them by the color of their hair or their skin or their do you see there's patterns in life and everything, and that's how they learn. So you're using those strengths to help them learn what you think is important that they need to learn about a world in which they seem very confused and difficult to understand. You're going to make it understandable.
I love that. And because there's so many different ways to teach with that. And I think what's so important is shifting that mindset to they're lining up cars. Oh, we have to teach them a play appropriately, which we don't recommend at all. It is seeing that that's a strength and building on that strength. And you provided a great
Yes,
way that everyone can build on that. So great information today on understanding the importance of seeing the strengths in our clients and our children and our students, and then how we can build on those strengths. And I promise you, when you tap into those strengths, you are going to build connection. So awesome, Sue.
right.
Thanks so much.
Okay.